My name is Mike Cleland. I'm an executive in residence with the Canada West Foundation, and I was talking about the social license to operate for natural resource industry. The key thing on social license is, if you go back, say, 10 years before people were thinking about the term social license, when resource industries were worried about not being able to get things done, the term was always NIMBY or various other kinds of acronyms, and people don't understand us. They don't realize what wonderful things we bring, and if we can only educate them, if they only understand our industry, then they'll of course see the wonderful things, and they'll come on side. I think people have realized that doesn't work, and what I wanted people to think about was focus on. It's not about educating people. It's not about high-level communications. It's not about fighting it out with the celebrities. It's about communities, and it's focusing on performance, real issues, working with the communities to get it right, giving people information as distinct from communicating at them, and helping build the capacity in the local communities to become partners. Good question. I mean, if I go back to my early career, I started out as an urban planner and used to go to small communities in Nova Scotia and talking about planning and all that kind of thing. And the thing that was really striking was that if you went in and started telling people things, you got wrong-footed right from the start. And I think the basic thing here is that people want to be engaged. They want to be asked what it is they're thinking about, what it is they're concerned about, what it is their community needs, and what matters to them. If you start there, eventually you'll get permission to tell them what you think they need to know. But if you start with that, they'll climb up. And I think that's just human nature. And engineers, company executives, people, kind of things I've done in my career, we're used to getting things done. We want to go in and do it. And increasingly, you just can't do that. You got to take the time to get people with you. And you got to start by asking questions. There's lots of emotion in it. There's a feeling that I'm being engaged, that somebody's respecting me, that somebody cares what I think. And once I start to think that, then I'm going to be coming at what you have to say a lot differently than if I feel you're coming in and shouting at me. And I think the resource industries, I've worked in the energy industry for 20 years, and I think we're pretty good at shouting at people. We're not very good at listening. We're getting better, a lot better. You put your finger on one of the trickiest things, because it's a question of managing expectations. Because you're not going in just to listen. You're going in with the idea that you want to get a project going, or a policy for that matter, if you're in a government, because it's very similar, very analogous. And so there has to be some acknowledgement of the terms when you go in. People have to understand that you're there for a purpose. So if I'm listening and somebody says, well, I don't like your project and I never want to see you again, that's probably not the answer that's really I'm not going to be able to respond very positively in that case. So there's that, and there's also how much information. You can't just go in usually with a blank slate, because that'll frustrate people. And in my urban planning career, that was it. If you just walked into a community and said, well, what do you think? They'd say, well, don't you have anything to say? So there's a tricky balance between I have something to tell you and I'm interested in what you have to say, and I'm prepared to take at least some of what you're saying on board. And most people are pretty reasonable. I don't know very many people who insist that everything that they're asking for be covered. Most people are looking for an accommodation. There's always the 10 or 15% of people who just want to shout at you. But there's the 85 or 90% who want to be heard and want to shape it, want to feel that they're shaping it because it's their community, and want to make sure that harmful things are avoided and the good things are maximized. So if you're going in, I mean, you're going to try that, right? I mean, you want local employment. You want to make sure that you're dealing with the environmental issues that people care about. You're dealing with cultural protection, especially, for example, with Aboriginal communities. I mean, you've got a bunch of your own expectations about what you're prepared to do. So it's not like you're very likely to just walk away and say, well, that's nice, but I'm not going to do it. Well, I'd say there's probably two steps here. 20, 30 years ago, it was a very different world. Communities were, deferential to authority. They, sort of, okay, well, we've got to do this because somebody's telling us, whether it's Victoria telling us or a company X, Y, Z. And traditionally, Canadians actually were very deferential. That's changed. That's changed a lot. And in particular, it's changed with Aboriginal communities, First Nations, who've said, no, we want to have something to say about this. That went through a cycle, as I say, when I said at the outset, that the reaction you got from government and from industry was, well, that's NIMBY, that's not my backyard, they're being irrational, we can just tell them what the story is. So now we're in, I'd say, the third phase, where industry and government are starting to adapt to that underlying reality of Canadians who aren't going to be told what to do the way maybe they were 40 years ago. I'd say we're very much at the beginning of it. I'd say it's been growing as a serious matter in corporate circles, I think probably maybe for 5 to 10 years, and it's becoming more commonplace just really in the last few years. I think governments are a bit behind, actually. But I've worked in government for a good part of my career, and I've always thought they tend to be behind. This has to be led by industry, and one of the speakers today in another session characterized it as industry has to lead, and this was dealing with natural capital, actually. Industry has to lead, and government has to be a fast follower. I think that's exactly it. And I think we're on the cusp of it. But we're going to be still working at this for 10 or 20 years or more to get to a state where we've rebuilt the relationship and you can move things along in an expeditious way that meets the needs of communities and of society at large. And then there's some really big issues like what do you do about climate change and things like that. That's not a local issue. We've got to get a stable climate change policy in place because people are saying, well, what are you talking about? I mean, you're ignoring it or you're not doing enough. So it works it works at sort of a high level as well as the community level. You got to deal with both. I think we've got a long, long haul ahead of us, though, to dig ourselves out of a pretty deep hole, if you will, of distrust. And that isn't just with First Nations communities, it's with lots of local communities. People don't trust, sometimes for very good reasons. They don't have adequate information. We need to figure out how you get that. How do you get information in a form and coming from a source that people do trust? How do you make sure the local communities have the capacity? And they have to build their own capacity. You can't give it to them. But you can help provide resources so that they have the capacity to be good partners, to have their own internal organization and decision making so that they don't take forever to make a decision. So when a decision does get made, it's stable. And I think industry and government can do things, again, working with local communities to help them develop that sort of capacity. People have to believe that you've got, and again, this is government, there's policy in place, carbon pricing, that is real and that is going to move the dial, and they're confident that that somebody isn't just trying to avoid it, and it feels that way sometimes. Sometimes, not always. It's not easy. It's not easy selling ordinary consumers on carbon pricing, and yet they've got to be stepping up too. BC government did a great job of got the timing just perfect in terms of how to introduce it, introduce the right kind of policy in the right way, and kind of world leading. But for the rest, today it's really hard. Getting anybody to talk about anything that increases their energy costs leads to a very short and unhappy conversation. You come to Globe because it's a great place to network with people, and because there's good sessions you learn things in areas such as I'm working right now, also in some other areas, like I do a lot of work on utilities and the utility of the future and all that. That's a big part of sustainability. So what am I here for? To kind of connect with people, to learn a bunch of things. And from the perspective of the Canada West Foundation, because the social license issue is one of our big priority focuses, it's an opportunity to get out and talk about what we're doing. It's a think tank, been around for just a little over 40 years. It was created back in the days when the mantra was the West wants in, and basically it was to have a Western voice on national policy issues. So it covers a pretty broad spectrum of policy issues: resource development, trade, investment, human resource development, training, and education. Based in Calgary, but it's sort of its compass is the four Western provinces. And again, it really is Western perspectives, Western voices being projected into the national policy debates. Well, Globe's a pretty neat brand, actually. I mean, we'll go back to 1990, and I've been to 2 or 3 or 4 over the years. So it's a place where a lot of people go. I mean, people that you work with or people you might want to work with, you're going to find them here in the hallways or in the sessions or whatever. And then you're going to learn things. You know, the sessions are substantive. They're concrete. They're very good people who are here speaking, and it's kind of fun. Everybody likes to go to Vancouver.